Very good morning, Brenda. They're in studio. Actually, I'm in Mombasa. We just joined here by Professor Paul Maringa in the Ministry of Public Works, who is accompanied by the Mombasa County Commissioner, Evan Sachoki. He's meeting a group of contractors and also stakeholders and other developers from the construction department or construction industry to just sensitize them about the building environment. And just to dissect it further, is the PS himself who just tell us the status of building environment here in Mombasa. Karibu Mwana PS. We are live on KTN News. Just give us a sneak preview of what you're doing here.
Okay. Yes, we've come in here under the auspices of the National Building Inspectorate. The National Building Inspectorate is a department of the State Department of Public Works. Their primary focus is to regularize buildings. Unlike what a lot of people think, their job is not to demolish buildings, but to regularize buildings. They basically do audits of all existing buildings, particularly buildings that were done in the 90s and even the ones that have been done now, so long as they're complete. And then they'll assess the structural soundness of those buildings. They'll look at elements of health and hygiene, and of course safety, fire safety, safety of the services, water and electricity. And ideally, then thereafter, they issue clear advice to the contractors and the building owners on how to improve the safety in those buildings, to make sure the buildings don't collapse, the buildings don't pose any risk or health hazard to the occupants. Now, the other thing they do is that obviously if they find the buildings are done very badly to a point where they cannot be rescued, then they also will provide guidelines on how to demolish the buildings. Buildings that are going to be demolished, in those sort of situations, we usually give the owners first opportunity to demolish buildings because we understand this structure that we are calling Sunny, akija anavunja nyumba, anaharibu mali ya mwenyewe. And Sunny will only come if you've been given notice to demolish a building and you don't comply. But government realizes that buildings cost money and that it will be in the interest of the public and the building owners to rescue as much property as they are able to. So we've come in here, therefore, to talk to contractors and developers and to a certain extent consultants. Tumekuja hapa na several government bodies. The power company is in here, KPA is here, NEMA is represented in here, the National Construction Authority, which is a parastatal of the State Department of Public Works, is also represented in here. A very important stakeholder in this sensitization seminar is also the Mombasa County government, because in reality the body that is authorized to give instructions for building demolition are actually the counties, because the primary approval for construction is the counties. Yes.
Then, last month, a human rights body, Haki Africa, said there's more than 2,000 illegal buildings in Mombasa. I don't know from your department, what's the status, and have you mapped out these buildings?
Yeah. Now, that term illegal is a term that needs to be understood. A building is not really illegal. It has been built, we can see it. In much the same way a human being cannot be illegal. You're alive. Usually the challenges are challenges of registration. That before you put up a building, there are certain procedures one should follow through. And therefore, I would interpret that to imply
because there are those who say it's either built on riparian land or somewhere substandard or there's no proper documentation.
Exactly, and that is where the due process is concerned. Ideally, before you put up a building, one, we require that you're guided by licensed and registered professionals. So building design must be done by architects, supported by civil engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, sometimes planners and interior designers. All those must be registered by government boards, like we have the Board of Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors. That one registered architects and quantity surveyors. There is the ERB, Engineers Registration Board, that registers all engineers. So a building is illegal to the extent that you haven't sought the services of those consultants. Secondly, once you have a good design, then the building must be assessed for compliance with government regulations for building. And the custodian of these government regulations are the county governments, the 47 counties. So if you're putting up a building in Kwale, then the county government of Kwale. And the regulations are basically abstracted from a national building code. or the Built Environment Bill that was promulgated in 2016. So hold on. So if then the county government hasn't given you authority to build, then the building is illegal. Yeah? But then for the benefit of Kenyans, the authority to build is not a blanket license to do anything. Usually there's some guidelines that is accompanies that authorization that a lot of people miss. It says very clearly, you have authority to put up the building, but then you must comply with all other regulations that guide development in that particular area. That is physical planning, NEMA, WARMA, and all those things.
Then lastly, there's been an outcry from our friends who are physically challenged that most of the buildings are not friendly to them.
It is true because issues of physical disabilities are emerging issues. But I do remember that we developed clear guidelines for safety and access for the physically handicapped 3 years ago, and they were absorbed in our legislation. We actually presented them in Parliament. We also have a body that partners with the Organization for the Physically Handicapped that has been given authority to inspect all buildings. And we have rules, and I'll give you an example. These days we say any building that is more than, any public building that is more than the ground floor must have a lift for the physically handicapped. I think it's also accepted in Kenya that any building that rises above a certain level needs to have a ramp. So I would say yes, we have challenges, but we recognize those challenges, and we are aligning the building industry to make sure that the physically handicapped are also included. Yes.
Thank you, for speaking to us. Well, Brenda, there you have it. That was the PS for Public Works, Professor Paul Maringa, just giving us a brief of the housing situation here in Mombasa and the county at large. Back to you in studio.
All right, thank you so much, Tobias Chanji. From Mombasa, we had